Did you know that Spider-Man once fought villains with martial arts, piloted a giant robot, and wasn't even named Peter Parker? Welcome to one of the wildest, weirdest, and most fascinating chapters in superhero history, the Japanese Spider-Man. But before you roll your eyes thinking this is just some obscure knockoff, hold on, because this version of Spider-Man didn't just swing from buildings. He rewrote the rules for the superhero genre in Japan and ultimately the world. The year was 1978. In a bold cross-cultural experiment, Marvel Comics struck a licensing deal with Toei Company, one of Japan's biggest animation and tokusatsu studios, the same minds behind shows like Kamen Rider and Super Sentai, the latter of which would eventually become the Power Rangers. The goal? Introduce Marvel superheroes to Japanese audiences in a way they'd never seen before. And what did Toei decide to do with Spider-Man? They reinvented him from scratch. Forget Peter Parker. In this universe, Spider-Man is Takuya Yamashiro, a motorcycle racer who gains his spider powers from an alien named Garia. Garia is the last survivor of the planet Spider, which had been destroyed by an evil alien empire known as the Iron Cross Army. And yes, this new Spider-Man doesn't just fight them hand-to-hand, he does it with the help of a spaceship that transforms into a colossal robot called Leopardon.
It sounds insane, and it is, but here's the twist. It worked. Japanese audiences went wild for this new interpretation. Kids tuned in week after week, not just for the action and explosions, but because Takuya brought something new to the screen. A hero who was haunted, driven, mysterious. Exactly the kind of protagonist Japanese tokusatsu fans loved. The show aired for 41 episodes and one feature film, and even though it ran for just over a year, it left a lasting legacy. For one thing, it invented the concept of a transforming giant robot in live-action superhero TV. Before Leopardon, tokusatsu heroes didn't rely on massive mechs, but after Spider-Man's Leopardon hit the screen, Toei realized how much kids loved the combination of superheroes and giant robots, so they ran with it. That idea became the template for Super Sentai, which later morphed into Power Rangers in the West. Yes, that means the reason the Power Rangers have giant Zords, you can thank Spider-Man. This little Japanese experiment changed the DNA of an entire genre. But that's not all. The Japanese Spider-Man wasn't just revolutionary in action, it was also intense. The show carried a darker tone influenced by the tragedies of the main character. Takuya watches his father die in the first episode. He's forced into a secret war against the Iron Cross Army, struggling with isolation, identity, and revenge. These weren't themes you'd typically see in Saturday morning cartoons. The Japanese Spider-Man was a hero burdened by his power, very much in line with Marvel's original concept of responsibility, but now told through a uniquely Japanese lens. Behind the scenes, there was drama too. The Leopardon robot, which had quickly become a fan favorite, began to break down during filming. Since the model was too expensive to fix, the production team started relying on recycled stock footage for Leopardon's battles. If you've ever watched the show and wondered why the robot fights all looked strangely similar, now you know why. But did the kids care? Not at all. Leopardon was a rock star, and Spider-Man was their fearless pilot. Another secret, the Japanese Spider-Man never removed his mask during the show, not even once. Why? The producers believed that the mystery made him more powerful, more iconic. This was the opposite of what Western audiences expected, where unmasking often served to humanize heroes. In Japan, mystery created myth. The theme song alone is enough to get you hooked. Blasting electric guitars, a fierce and passionate vocalist shouting Spider-Man over and over. This wasn't just a catchy tune, it was a war cry. It set the tone for everything that followed. Over-the-top action, alien drama, emotional weight, and heroic justice all wrapped into one. And here's something few fans know, even Stan Lee himself, the co-creator of Spider-Man, loved this version. When he first saw it, he was amazed at how creatively the character had been reimagined. It was a version he never could have imagined himself, but he respected it deeply. Years later, Marvel would even honor the Spider-Man by including him in the Marvel's multiverse. Yes, Takuya Yamashiro is canon in Marvel's Spider-Verse. He's not just a footnote, he's a legend.
So, what makes this Spider-Man truly unforgettable? Maybe it's the fearless way it diverges from tradition. Maybe it's the blend of high drama, sci-fi, and martial arts. Or maybe, just maybe, it's the fact that in a world full of copycats and reboots, this Spider-Man dared to be something entirely new. As the city of Tokyo trembled under the threat of the Iron Cross army, Spider-Man stood ready, not with just webs and courage, but with a towering ally no one could ignore. Leopardon, the giant robot guardian, wasn't just a cool gimmick. It was the beating heart of this wild reimagining, a symbol of unstoppable power and the unexpected key to the show's massive success. When Takuya Yamashiro first merged with Leopardon, it wasn't just a hero jumping into a robot. It was the fusion of two worlds, classic superhero storytelling and the over-the-top high-octane energy of Japanese tokusatsu. Leopardon wasn't just huge, it was armed with missiles, energy swords, and the devastating Sword Vigor, a final attack that obliterated enemies in a flash. And here's the thing, the fights always ended fast. Villains would grow to kaiju size after being defeated by Spider-Man, only to be vaporized in seconds by Leopardon.
Was it repetitive? Maybe, but did it work? Absolutely. Children were obsessed. Toy sales for Leopardon exploded across Japan. The producers knew they had struck gold, and they milked it for everything it was worth. But behind those flashing lights and booming explosions was a truth few knew. Leopardon was breaking down. The actual robot model used in filming was fragile and difficult to maneuver. After a few episodes, it became clear that it couldn't survive the full range of motion required for complex action scenes. The solution? Stock footage. Lots of it. The team would film short bursts of Leopardon launching an attack or landing, then splice that same footage into later episodes. It was subtle at first, but by the end of the series, eagle-eyed viewers began to notice. Still, nobody really complained. Kids just wanted to see Leopardon win. And win he did, every time. Now let's talk about the villains. The Iron Cross Army, led by the sinister Professor Monster. With glowing red eyes and a voice like a demon, Professor Monster was the classic mad scientist turned intergalactic warlord. His goal was clear: conquer Earth, eliminate the last of the spider people, and rule through terror. He was joined by the wicked Amazoness, a cold, calculating second-in-command dressed in red leather and oozing menace. She was no sidekick. She led missions, fought in battles, and brought psychological warfare to the fight. Every episode brought a new machine BEM, bizarre hybrid monsters born from the twisted experiments of the Iron Cross Army. Some were part insect, part machine. Others had traits of sea creatures, dinosaurs, or even ghosts. These weren't just villains. They were nightmares made flesh, tailored to test Spider-Man's limits. And each of them had a brief moment of triumph before Leopardon would appear and slice them into oblivion.
But here's what made it work. The stakes were always personal. Spider-Man wasn't just saving strangers. He was avenging the memory of his father, protecting his sister, and struggling with the responsibility placed upon him by fate. Takuya Yamashiro didn't wear his costume for glory, he wore it because he had to, because if he didn't fight, Earth would fall. That emotional depth gave weight to even the silliest plots. One week, Spider-Man might be chasing a villain that turns people into marionettes. The next, he's rescuing a kidnapped child and fighting off guilt from a failed mission. The tone would shift, but the emotional core remained. This was a hero in pain, doing his best in a world that didn't understand him. Interestingly, while the show was intended for kids, the writers didn't shy away from mature themes. Betrayal, loss, duty, and even existential crisis appeared in subtle ways. Takuya often questioned why he was chosen. He doubted himself. He suffered, yet each time he stood back up. That blend of campy fun and real emotion gave the series a strange but powerful balance. Let's not forget the production secrets.
Unlike many tokusatsu shows, Japanese Spider-Man had an unusually high budget for its time, mostly because Toei and Marvel wanted to impress each other. Toei pushed the limits of their effects team, using pyrotechnics, wirework, and new camera tricks to make Spider-Man's movements feel faster and more fluid than anything Japanese viewers had seen before. The suit was customized for athleticism, and the stuntmen, especially Hirofumi Koga, the main suit actor, performed high-risk parkour stunts that were revolutionary in 1978. Spider-Man's wall crawling was filmed using tilted sets and clever editing, often making it seem like he was defying gravity in real time. There were no CGI tricks. Everything was practical, and that gave the show a rawness that modern effects often lack. Every explosion, every flip, every crash was real.
And here's something even diehard fans might not know. Many of Spider-Man's poses, battle stances, and hand movements from this Japanese version were later adopted into other tokusatsu and anime shows. You'll see echoes of Takuya's style in Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, and even anime like Gurren Lagann. His dramatic pointing, his silent stare before battle, it all became part of the tokusatsu visual language. The show may have been short-lived, but its influence rippled across genres. Without Takuya Yamashiro, there might not have been a Power Rangers, at least not in the way we know it. There might not have been a Gao-Gai-Gar or a Voltron. The seeds planted in this 1978 experiment would bloom for decades. But perhaps the most intriguing mystery lies not in the show itself, but in what came after. Why did the series end at episode 41? What happened to Takuya? Why didn't Toei continue the saga with a second season?
Despite its explosive popularity and cultural impact, the Japanese Spider-Man's journey came to a sudden and mysterious end. Episode 41 aired, and just like that, it was over. No final battle with Professor Monster, no epic showdown to close the arc, no dramatic sacrifice or redemption, just silence. Fans were left in confusion. Why end something so groundbreaking? Why cut short the hero who brought together two worlds? The answer, like many things in show business, lies in a mixture of budget constraints, changing studio priorities, and a quiet shift in strategy at Toei. Although the show was a commercial success, particularly in merchandise, it had become increasingly expensive to produce. Leopardon's mechanical issues were just the tip of the iceberg. Maintaining the high-octane effects, the fight choreography, and the miniature city sets pushed the production budget beyond what the studio could comfortably manage on a weekly basis. At the same time, Toei was beginning to see the massive potential of an idea that Spider-Man had accidentally pioneered: a team of color-coded heroes with individual powers and a shared, transformable robot. Just a few months after Spider-Man left the screen, Toei launched Battle Fever J, a show that was part of the Super Sentai franchise and also a co-production with Marvel. And yes, this new team of heroes had their own giant robot. Sound familiar? Toei had tasted success and saw a bigger opportunity, a formula, one that could be reused, restructured, and rebooted year after year. Spider-Man had given them the blueprint, but now it was time to build an empire. And build it they did, on the ashes of Takuya Yamashiro's story. But here's the poetic twist. The story of Japanese Spider-Man didn't die. It simply went to sleep, hibernating like a legend waiting to be rediscovered.
For decades, this version of Spider-Man remained largely unknown outside Japan. Western fans had heard rumors, seen a few blurry clips on early internet forums, or maybe found a bootleg VHS tape from a comic convention. But the full picture remained hidden. That changed in the 2000s. As the internet exploded and cross-cultural fandoms merged online, clips of the Japanese Spider-Man began to circulate. Fans were stunned. Some laughed at Leopardon, others were intrigued by the darker tone. Most were simply amazed that this even existed. But among the crowd was someone very important, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, the directors of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. While developing the 2018 film, they dove deep into the Spider-Man mythos, and stumbled upon Takuya. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. A motorcycle-riding, alien-powered Spider-Man with a robot. It was too wild to ignore. And while he didn't appear in the first Spider-Verse film, they immediately knew he belongs here. Marvel Comics beat them to it. In 2014, Marvel officially introduced the Japanese Spider-Man, Takuya Yamashiro, into the comic book multiverse. In the Spider-Verse comic event, dozens of alternate Spider-People team up to fight a deadly interdimensional threat. Among them stands Takuya, Leopardon by his side, launching missiles and wielding his sword vigor against cosmic enemies. And guess what? He wasn't just a background character. He played a crucial role in the final battle. That moment was a turning point. This wasn't just a nod to nostalgia. It was a formal acknowledgement, you are one of us. Takuya Yamashiro was now canon. The Spider-Verse wasn't just a fun gimmick. It was a celebration of everything Spider-Man could be, across cultures, timelines, and imaginations. And at the center of it all stood the man from Japan, who had once fought alone and unrecognized. Fans rejoiced. Suddenly, interest in the 1978 series exploded. Subtitled versions spread across streaming sites, documentaries were made, and interviews resurfaced with the original actors. Shinji Todo, who played Takuya, was stunned. After so many years, the world had remembered him, not as a knockoff, but as a pioneer. Even Stan Lee spoke about his admiration. In interviews, he called the Japanese Spider-Man incredible and fascinating, and praised Toei for their bold creativity. To Stan, it was proof that superheroes could be universal and that their essence could survive even when the form changed completely. And then came Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse 2023. Hype began building as fans speculated, would Takuya appear? And while he didn't make his official debut in that film, his shadow loomed large. A drawing of Leopardon appeared in the Spider Society HQ. A brief silhouette in a monitor screen looked suspiciously like our helmeted hero. Easter eggs everywhere. It was clear Marvel hadn't forgotten. In fact, word began to spread that Takuya Yamashiro was being saved for something special, something big. Rumors of a Spider-Verse sequel featuring him in full force circled fan communities. Some even whispered about a potential live-action return, with Shinji Todo reprising his role as an older, wiser Spider-Man from Earth 51778. Imagine that for a moment. A man who was once told his version of Spider-Man was too weird, now being honored alongside Miles Morales, Gwen Stacy, and Peter B. Parker. A man who carried his legacy in silence for decades, now welcomed back into the fold as a founding web-slinger. And perhaps the most beautiful part, none of this would have happened without the passion of the fans. It was their curiosity, their laughter, their questions, did Spider-Man really pilot a giant robot in the 70s, that brought Takuya back from the shadows.
In the decades since Takuya Yamashiro first swung onto Japanese television screens, his legend has taken on a strange and beautiful life of its own. Once thought to be a footnote in Spider-Man history, a strange experiment tucked away in the vaults of Marvel licensing, this version of the web-slinger has become a symbol of something far greater. He is proof that creativity knows no borders, that identity can be reimagined, and that the soul of a hero lives far beyond the limits of origin stories and continuity. The most remarkable thing about Japanese Spider-Man is not just how bizarre or cool he was, it's how timeless he became. In Japan, he was the face of a revolution. His arrival kicked open the door to the mecha superhero hybrid that would shape tokusatsu and anime for generations. You see echoes of his DNA in Super Sentai, Ultraman, Kamen Rider, and even modern anime like My Hero Academia. And not just in design or fight scenes, but in the tone, the duality of pain and justice, in the idea that great power always comes with unbearable weight. Leopardon, once a last-minute toy insertion to help boost sales, became a cultural icon. Toy collectors today hunt for original Leopardon figures like relics of a forgotten age. Some fetch thousands of dollars online. In museums of Japanese pop culture, Leopardon stands tall next to Gundams and Evangelion units. He's no longer Spider-Man's robot. He's a legend in his own right. And what about Takuya? In cosplay conventions from Tokyo to Sao Paulo, you'll find fans dressed in that sleek, slightly wrinkled 1978 suit. The webbing is thicker, the eyes more triangular, and the spider on the chest a bit chunkier, but it's unmistakably him. These aren't jokes, they're tributes. Homages to the man who once stood alone as a hero in a world that didn't understand him. Then came the memes. Oh, the memes. Clips of the Japanese Spider-Man flipping dramatically through the air, introducing himself in slow motion with, "I am the emissary from hell, Spider-Man," flooded social media. Fans mashed them up with hip-hop beats, remixed the footage into TikToks, and turned once-forgotten moments into viral gold. The absurdity, the charm, the pure chaos of the series made it perfect internet material. But beneath the laughter was always a glimmer of awe. Even the most ironic edits carried admiration. This Spider-Man was strange, yes, but undeniably cool. Then came the retrospectives, the critical essays, the YouTube documentaries titled things like "The Spider-Man You Were Never Meant to See" or "How Japan Reinvented a Superhero." Suddenly, college students were writing theses on tokusatsu influence, filmmakers were citing Takuya in interviews, and directors of Spider-Man movies were name-dropping Leopardon during press tours.
And as all this unfolded, something even more special happened. Younger generations started watching. Children who weren't alive in the 70s sat down with their parents or discovered the series online and fell in love. They didn't care that the effects were dated or the plotline surreal. They saw a hero fighting monsters, standing up for what was right, mourning his father, saving his city. They didn't see the Japanese version, they just saw Spider-Man. This rebirth was never part of the plan. No one at Toei in 1978 imagined that this little experiment would echo for more than 40 years. No one at Marvel guessed that a giant robot called Leopardon would someday become canon. And certainly no one expected that the Spider-Verse, the idea of countless spider people from infinite dimensions, would become the defining concept of Spider-Man storytelling in the 21st century. But here we are. And perhaps that's the greatest legacy of Japanese Spider-Man. He taught us that Spider-Man doesn't belong to one culture, one look, or one voice. He belongs to the world, to anyone who's lost something, to anyone who's ever felt alone, to anyone who wakes up in the morning, puts on their mask, literal or metaphorical, and fights their own battles in silence. Takuya Yamashiro, the emissary from hell, didn't just save Tokyo, he inspired a generation. He left behind a legacy made not of spider webs, but of dreams. Dreams that say it's okay to be different, that courage comes in many forms, and that sometimes the strangest heroes are the ones who stay with us the longest.
So the next time you watch a Spider-Verse film and see a flash of red and silver armor, or hear the hum of a sword named Vigor slicing through the sky, remember, he's still out there, swinging, fighting, inspiring. Because in every multiverse, in every dimension, and in every kid who ever looked up at the sky and dreamed of flying, Spider-Man lives on. The end. But as any Spider fan knows, no story ever really ends.